Originating from volcanic activity or coral reef formations, oceanic islands are land masses that are often highly isolated from continental land. Being so isolated, these islands often harbor many endemic plant and animal species that occur nowhere else on Earth. However, they are also often of great conservation concern, with many of their species threatened by extinction. To learn more about oceanic islands, we visited Dr. Jean-Yves Hirault-Meyer in Tahiti, French Polynesia. Jean-Yves works for the Delegation for Research of the Government of French Polynesia for the past 20 years. He's a leading expert on the ecology and conservation of the species and ecosystems on the islands in the South Pacific. He leads many conservation projects and is passionate about teaching ecology and conservation to the local island communities and students.
Jean-Yves, can you explain to us why oceanic islands are so valuable for biodiversity research and conservation?
Okay, well, oceanic islands usually are small islands, so as far as biodiversity is concerned, the number of species is relatively small. So you will not find a lot of native plant or animal species on the land. But what is very specific to islands, because of their isolation, they have a high number of endemic species. That means that a lot of species which are native are also only found in those islands. So it's called endemicity. So the rate of endemism is very high on remote islands. For instance, for plants here in French Polynesia, we have only 900 native vascular plants, but 64% of those plants are endemic to French Polynesia, only found in those islands.
And in terms of conservation, why are islands often used probably as a research model as well?
Many of those native and endemic species, plants and animals, are also threatened. Some of them are almost extinct because of different reasons. And it's because also they have very small population. Again, small area, land area means small population of species, so they are much more susceptible to extinction if there's a big disturbance, compared to continental species that have a larger distribution range, etc.
And coming back to the biogeography of these islands here, so how do all the species we see here manage to come here, given that Tahiti or French Polynesia is so isolated?
So for the native species, the plant and animals, they arrived in those very remote islands by their own dispersal means. For instance, it could be a sea current. So if a plant has floating seeds, they are dispersed by sea currents, or it could be wind currents. So some plants are adapted to long distance wind dispersal. So they arrived with wind currents. And for some of the plants with sticky seeds, they can be dispersed by birds, seabirds, which are known to travel long distances. And some plants with fleshy fruits, can be also ingested by frugivorous birds that eat fruits. And those frugivorous birds, for instance, fruit doves, and they can also disperse those plants over long distances, relatively long distances.
Coming back again now to conservation, you mentioned already that small population sizes and probably small genetic diversity can be one problem, of course, to conserve these endemic species. What are other challenges you see here, especially maybe in the Pacific and French Polynesia?
Well, the main challenges for biodiversity conservation are trying to manage or to stop those pressures, those threats. And one of the main threats to island biodiversity is invasive alien species, so species which were introduced with humans, and some of them becoming widespread with a huge impact on the local biodiversity. For instance, predators, rats and feral cats and dogs and pigs and goats. All those mammals were introduced by humans, and and predating the native fauna and flora.
So what could be solutions then for managing these? Really pest eradication, or what are you normally doing in conservation practice here?
Well, what we do both control, all kind of control. Could be manual control, like removal of the weeds, or chemical control, baiting the rats, biological control too, introducing natural enemies to try to control the population of the pest. But there's also one important point is also to develop what we call biosecurity. So it's to avoid the introduction of new non-native species that could become future pests. So biosecurity is the first line of defense against invasive alien species. Because when they are already on the island, they are difficult to control or to eradicate.
Everybody is thinking and talking about climate change, and that this will have a devastating impact, especially on the island and island nations here, again in the Pacific. Do you see climate change as a big threat here for the island diversity?
Climate change is obviously a big threat, but it's a threat in the near future, on a mid or long-term time, and it's not the immediate threat. The immediate threats are habitat destruction by people, with growing urbanization, deforestation, a lot of fires in dryland habitats, the introduction of invasive species, of course, and pollution is also a threat to biodiversity, all kind of pollution. So climate change is part of those threats, and it accelerates the decrease of biodiversity. But for me, as a conservation biologist, I'm trying to solve the immediate threats, mainly invasive species.
So maybe also along those lines, what would your advice be for an early career researcher interested in studying or even conserving the island floras here?
So a lot of students and local students of mine, they are very interested or attracted by conservation biology, but only of big animals, such as whales and sea turtles and dolphins or birds. And there's already a lot of study being done on those groups of plants and animals. Vascular plants are well known, but there are biodiversity is not about big animals or plants with showy flowers. It is also about small animals, the arthropods, the insects. The arthropods they make the biggest part of biodiversity, including in oceanic islands. So I told them, well, maybe you should work much more on insects, arthropods, and invertebrates, small stuff, microorganisms, soil bacteria. And now we have a tool to work on that. We've got genetic tools, very good tools to study the invisible part of biodiversity.
So, Jean-Yves, do you have a favorite island then?
Well, I'm Tahitian, but I don't have a favorite island. All the islands are specific, are unique. It's not only because of a biodiversity, the endemic species, but they are also unique because of cultural aspects. The people who live on islands are different everywhere you go, and that's also as interesting as biodiversity. But I have a favorite island. It's not here in French Polynesia. It's in this French territory between Samoa, Tonga, and Fiji called Wallis et Futuna. In this French territory, you have one island, Alofi, that is uninhabited during the night. So there's no people living on the island. They go from Futuna to Alofi just to fish and cultivate the land. But at night, they come back to Futuna. So at night, this island is empty. It's a pretty large island, but there's nobody's there. And as a scientist, a conservation scientist, I was lucky to be able to stay at night on Alofi with the permit of the king, because there are kings, still kings in Wallis et Futuna, and the chiefs. So that's great to be alone on a big island by yourself, and it's like being the king of the island, in fact.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Jean-Yves.
Welcome.